There are some key measurements that you got to have in place. You got to have your bust measurement, which is taken at the fullest area of your bust. Your waist measurement, where your real waistline is, not where it's supposed to be, but where you wear your clothing. And then you've got a hip measurement. Just because you can view this video over and over, I'm going to tell you some measurements, some things that you need to know. When you're doing a bust measurement, if a person has a larger bust or you have a larger bust, there are two measurements you have to take. You're going to go around the back, underneath the armpit, and you're going to go over top the bust. Okay, and as you can see, that measurement is 34 3/4. Okay, that's over the bust. Then you're going to take the measurement around that bust, and that measurement is 33 3/4. Usually on a person with a larger bust, the difference between this measurement and this one's going to be 2 inches or more. If it's 2 inches or more, you go up to the next size on your chart. So let's say that this measurement is 34 and this one is 36 and a half. Well, then you're going to go up to the next size on your chart, because that means they need the fuller bust. Your waist measurement, you're going to take it again around the waist area. All right. Don't squeeze when you're doing it. Get the natural waist, 27 1/4. Write those measurements down. Your hip is going to be at the widest portion of your hip. Okay, for different people that varies. All right, and we're going to get that measurement. Now, that measurement here is 39. So the 27 1/4 is my waist, and 39 is the hip. And I'm going to cut a skirt for that. All right, that's our first lesson on measuring. So the waist, 27 1/4, and that hip measurement around the widest part of the hip, is 39 1/4. So I'm going to write that measurement down. And what I'm going to do is go to my pattern, and this can get a little tricky, but it's really easy. When you go to your pattern, let's say we put this up here just to kind of line up things. If you look at this pattern, our measurements across the top, our size is 8 to 20. The bust measurements are here. Here we go. Now we're at the waist. So I'm looking for the closest measurement to my 27 1/4. Obviously, 26 1/2 is too small. 28 is too large. But you want to go with the 28 because it's easier to take something in when it's too large than to let it out. So according to this, 28 is my measurement. That corresponds to the size 14 skirt. So the waist of the skirt is a 14. Now don't panic. Sewing sizes are always 2 times larger than what you would buy in the store for clothing made in the store. So a 14 means that it's like a size 10, 8 to 10, okay? Then we got to look at the hip measurement. And according to the hip measurement, I said 39 1/4, which means the 14 hip is too small. That's 38. But the 40 is just a tad bit bigger. So we're going to go with a 40 hip because it's going to be more accommodating for what we just got as our measurement, which means that it's going to be a size 18 skirt hip. So when we cut this pattern, we want our skirt to have a size 14 waist and an 18 hip. Okay, so now you're going to talk about your pattern. When you're behind the pattern, look up in your right-hand corner to see your sizes. United States sizes are 8 to 20. Don't mistakenly go by the European sizes because you're going to get messed up. So this pattern has in it the sizes 8 to 20. If it were a different pattern, it might not say that. It might just say sizes 8, 10, 12, which means that when you look at the back and you see your measurements and you need a 14, then you need to go get the bigger pattern so that you can make the changes and it'll fit you better. Okay? So let's see here. We've done some measuring. We've selected a pattern. And now what we want to do is take a good look at the pattern pieces. Before you open up the actual pattern pieces, look at the pieces once again that you're going to need on here. And I'm going to select skirt A. And skirt A is simple. It has 2 darts, a dart on the front. And most clothing is going to have the darts. You're going to have the darts unless it's full. And it has the darts in the back. And it has a split in the back. So I'm going to choose this skirt pattern. Very simple. And I would suggest perhaps you choose this one. Or you can choose this one. It's the same thing. Stitching difference is it's going to be a fuller skirt. Okay. Now, here you go. Now you got to choose fabric. When you're looking at your pattern, it's going to tell you on the bottom corner of all those measurements, it's going to tell you the type of fabric you can get. They suggest a whole list of fabrics here: cotton types, gauze, linen, silky types. Truth be told, you can use whatever you like because people pretty much wear what they want to wear. So you just got to make sure that the fabric you get is going to look good in a skirt, that it's going to be wearable, and that it's going to be easy for you to sew. So I would not suggest you start off with a silky print or a polyester silky fabric. They're very hard to sew, and for your first project, you might want to give up. So I've chosen a cotton piece. This is a cotton polyester. If you go into Joann's, they got a whole wall full of them for people who quilt. Most people who quilt go and get these fabrics. I tend to like them because they're poly and cotton, so they're washable. They pretty much hold their shape. And but the difference with these is that they only come in 45 inches wide. Now, why is that important to you? Because the width of the fabric is going to determine how much fabric you need to make a garment. So if I measure from here to the fold, it's roughly going to be 22 inches, which means this fabric is 44 inches wide. Some fabrics are going to be 54 inches wide. Some fabrics are going to be 60 inches wide. And then you have your 44 and a half or 45. Okay, here's what you need to know. When you look at your pattern, I've chosen skirt A. All right, so now I've chosen a fabric that's 45 inches wide, roughly. So I look here and see for a 45-inch fabric, 45-inch wide piece of fabric, the size of the skirt is a 14 waist. They're telling me I need 1 yard of fabric. 1 yard, okay? If I were using a 60-inch piece of fabric, which is wider, in this case, I still only need 1 yard of fabric, okay? And your fabric is measured in yards. If I were going for skirt B and C, then I'm going to have different things that are required for the skirt. For example, with skirt B, there's an overlay over that skirt. So the overlay of that skirt requires 1 7/8 inch of fabric. So that's almost 2 yards of fabric. In a wide 60, it would be 1 yard of fabric. For number C, the skirt C, this skirt would have an overlay and a flounce over the skirt. And in that case, you need 1 1/4 yards of the overlay fabric or 1 yard of that fabric. Okay, skirt D is just your full skirt with the waist that's darted. You're going to need almost 2 yards, 1 7/8 yards of a 45-inch fabric and 1 1/8 yards of a 60-inch fabric. When you go in the store, they can also help you read this pattern. You just tell them which one you want. But more importantly, I want you to learn this. So when you go in the store, you kind of know what you're looking for. But if you by chance aren't 100% sure, you ask somebody before they cut your fabric, because usually they don't allow you any refunds on cutting. Okay, so I'm going with skirt A, which is going to take up about 1 yard of fabric. This is where sewing becomes economical and fun, because you can go and get a very expensive piece of fabric. Once you learn how to sew and you're comfortable, you can get a $40 piece of fabric and make, with 1 yard of fabric, you can make a skirt that probably costs $200 or $300 in the store. Now, one of the things I'm going to teach you in my advanced class is how to take this same pattern and create a lined skirt that looks like it's couture, like you bought it in a couture shop. That's in the next group. But for right now, let's master the basics. Okay? Thank you. Now we're going to take out those pattern pieces that come with this pattern. We're going to stretch it out on the table. They're tissue patterns, so you got to be careful with them. They will tear on you. Okay? And don't get scared by all of the markings you see. I promise you. It's a piece of cake once you learn what you're looking at. So I'm going to spread this out. And in this case, with your pattern, everything's on one sheet. Because some patterns have 4 and 5 sheets, 50 and 60 pieces to them. And you don't want to tackle that as your first project. But keep in mind, we're going to go back to our pattern. And we want skirt A. With skirt A, as you can see, it tells you front of A is number 1. The back of A is number 2. And it says B and C also because those skirts use these same pieces. But then you got a front facing for A, which is number 3, and a back facing, which is number 4. And that's it for this skirt. So you got 4 pieces to this skirt. Piece of cake, okay? In 1 week's time, you're going to be making skirts. All right, so the piece that I'm looking for is the corresponding piece. So this is pattern piece number 1. So this is one of the pieces that I'm going to cut out. And I tell you a little secret. I have 2 different types of scissors. I have scissors for cutting paper, and I have scissors for cutting fabric. And paper scissors are the kind that you just get anywhere, Rite Aid, CVS, whoever. But the pattern scissors, you want to buy a good quality pair from Joann's. Catch them when they're on sale, when they're 50% off, and then get yourself a $40 pair of scissors because they're going to last you forever. All right, and the scissors that are $40 scissors, they're right here. They are stainless steel, and they're called Ginger. All right, I get these scissors. This is like a $40 pair, and I got them for under 20 bucks. Okay, and these scissors are very sharp, and they do the job. But don't cut paper with them. Don't let your kids cut paper with them either, because it will ruin them cutting paper. They're made for fabric. Okay, so I need skirt piece 1. I need skirt piece 2, which is found here. So I'm going to cut this out. Now, I want you to know I am not cutting on the line. I'm cutting around to just get the piece off of here. Because before we cut anything on the line, we kind of got to determine which lines apply to the size you're using. So I've got skirt piece 2. Now I need skirt piece 3. And skirt piece 3 and 4 are both over here. Okay? And keep in mind, I'm giving you a master design course on sewing and pattern making. So I want you to keep up with me, play your videos over and over and over until you really master this, okay? So 3 and 4 are the pieces here. Now here's where I'm going to take you away from the pattern. On your pattern, they got all these pictures of layouts of the fabric. We ain't doing none of that. I'm going to teach you like a pro. You're going to learn to look at your pattern piece, figure out what you're doing with it. Look at it like this. If you got 1 yard of fabric, that's all you need. You got to get this to fit on there the right way. And I'm going to talk to you how to do that. And you're not going to worry yourself with all of this. What you need to know is that these pattern pieces have all the information on them that you need. All you have to do is read them. For example, pattern piece 1 says that I'm going to cut 1 of this piece. And I'm going to cut it on the fold of the fabric. Okay? That's for skirt A. All right, if I'm looking at skirt C, you're going to cut 1 on fold of a contrasting fabric, but that's not what we're doing. So we're doing skirt A, front A, cut 1 on fold of fabric. So we know we're getting fabric out of this. Okay, skirt part, pattern piece number 2, which is the back. We're going to cut 2 of the fabric. You see how it's written here? 2 of the fabric for the back. Okay, not 1. But the way we're going to lay our fabric out, you'll be able to cut 2. So now that we've pressed our fabric, we have our folded edge near us, and so we can start laying our pieces out. I always suggest that all your pieces go the same direction. If this is the top of your skirt, this is the bottom, then when you get to this piece, the top should be here and the bottom should be down here. Okay, now notice here, I have not cut my pattern piece out like most people do, so let's do that. Let me get my paper scissors. So I'm going to cut on this fold line. You don't cut the line away. You want to cut so you can still see that line. But I'm going to cut on that fold line, all right, because I'm going to lay my pattern out on that line. So I'm going to cut here. And if you put your iron on a low setting, you can also press the wrinkles out of the pattern piece, but please keep it on a low setting or you'll be going to the store and get a new pattern because you'll end up scorching the pattern or burning it, and you don't want to do that, and you don't want to set your house on fire either. So we're going to I'm just cutting out at the bottom edge. All right, now this is where it gets real fun. You're going to see a whole lot of lines, and these lines represent a size. The inward size is an 8, then there's a 10, there's a 12, a 14, a 16, a 18, a 20. If you notice, each line is distinctively different. The size 8 line is going to be dot, dash, whatever. 10 is all dots. 12 is all dashes. 14 is a dash, a dot, dash, dot. 16 is long dashes. Okay, 18 you can see, and 20 is a solid line. Remember, for this pattern, we're looking to cut out at the waistline. We want it to be a 14, but by the time it gets to her hip line, we want it to be a 16. Now, here's the secret that you need to know in sewing. Usually, the distance between the waist and the hip is 9 inches. So watch this. I'm looking at the waist area on this skirt. So the waist is roughly here, okay? And I'm going to go down 9 inches. So this lets me know where my hip area is, so that when I'm getting ready to make this pattern wider at the hip, I know where it's going to fall. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to pin this pattern down to the paper. To the skirt fabric. Now, what you need to know is that when you're pinning fabric, you're doing what we call perpendicular pinning. All right, write that down. Perpendicular pinning, which means that every pin you put in is going to be perpendicular to the line that's running alongside. So if you're getting ready to cut this side of your skirt, your pins are going here. When you're cutting this side of the skirt, your pins are going this way. You're cutting, well, you're not cutting on the fold, but you're pinning on the fold. Your pins are going to go this way. You want to cut the waistline of your skirt, your pins are going to go perpendicular. Because if your pins are not perpendicular, let's say we put our pins in this way, then the pattern can start sliding and moving and it won't be accurate. So pinning it perpendicular keeps that line sturdy. Okay, I'm going to get some pins. Okay, with the starter kit that I sent you some pins. But what I did not tell you was that you need to get your own magnet. Okay, the magnet is cheap, but the key is you want something like this, because guess what it does? It picks up the pins, no matter where they are. If they're on the floor, you can get down there and it just picks them right up. Okay, so I'm going to start with pinning my garment in place. First, one at the top, at the bottom, and one at the top. And as you can see, I go down and just let it touch the table to scoop it up and bring that pin in. Okay, so the pin edge is not going past the line. Okay, and then I'm going to look at the areas in between. So I go halfway, all right? And then I go halfway in between those two. And then I'm going to go halfway in between these two. So halfway between every one of them. And that's kind of how you get your pins on here nicely. So the distance between these two is midway. All right? And then the distance between these two is going to be midway. The distance between these two is midway. Okay, same here. I'm going to go over here now. All right? And so now that I have this in place, I'm going to go to this corner. Now, I'm sewing my skirt at a 16, so I don't have to go all the way over to the 20. I'm going to stop where my 16 line is going to be. As you can see, my line is here, and it's going to go on up, okay? When it gets to the hip, it's up here. And then when it gets to the waist, we're doing a 14 waist, not a 16. So I'm going to come into my 14 line, okay? All right? Now, the distance between these two is going to be about midway here. All right, and this is on the 16 because it's below the hip line. So that's all down here, 16. So which means halfway between these two is like this. Can you see the technique I'm using with my hands? I'm just catching it. I'm catching my fabric, and I'm using my finger to bring it up, and so that I keep control of the fabric. That's the key. Keep the control of the pattern. Okay, so now halfway between these two. Because now my line's going to start to move from a 16 to a 14, I'm going to come on in here somewhere on my 14, and halfway between these two is right there. Now, if you think you need more pins, that's fine. Put some more in there. Because I'm a professional, I don't need as many, but you may need more. Notice now I've done opposite sides, and now I'm going to do top and bottom. So this is really a piece of cake. So I put one in the middle. I put one halfway between here and here. And between here and here, I put one, okay? And the same thing's going to happen up here. Halfway in between, I'm going to put one, okay? And then I'm going to put halfway between these two and halfway between these two. Notice the edge of my pen, the sharp edge is always toward the outward end of your pattern, okay? Because if you do it like this and start and go inward, your fabric's going to move, your pattern's going to move. It's not accurate, okay? Now, I'm going to put my next piece on here, because you want all the pieces on there before you do any cutting to make sure you got everything the way you want them, okay? So, on this pattern, this is a back section, okay? So, obviously, with this back section, let's see. Yep, those two are too wide to go beside each other. So with the back pattern, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure my pattern is flat, okay? I'm going to cut it out down the side here, just like this. All right, I'm going to cut. All right. And take your time and cut. I've been doing this forever, and I still mess up sometimes. But, you know, first time around, take all the time you need to cut. And to be honest, I tell you, I cut one day, and then I'll sew the next. Because sometimes it takes a lot of time and energy and brain power to get this right. And you want to kind of be really fresh when you start sewing. So here we go. Cutting on the bottom here where the hemline is going to be. Okay. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this piece on here. And remember I told you it has to go up and down. So this line has to be parallel with that line so we know that it's on the straight up and down. The way I do that is I take my tape measure and I measure the distance from the edge of my selvage to that arrow. So let me make it an even 4 inches across. So from the edge to this arrow is 4 inches. Now at the top from the edge, let's see here, let me get a pin. Put that pin in here. Hold that in place. And from the edge to here, 4 inches. Perfect. And I'm going to pin it right in place like this. So my pattern cannot go anywhere because I pinned on those two lines. So we're going to start again with our sides of our pattern, across and across, and top and bottom. Okay, so here we go. We start up here in the corner and in the middle. And notice by pinning these arrows, it keeps my pattern from moving. And so then in between those two, it's going to be here and here. In between those two, it's going to be here and here. Okay, and by the way, make sure your pins come close enough, but not over the edge, so they hold your pattern down for you. So that when you go to cut your pattern, it's not moving out of your way. Okay? And then I'm going to come across to this side. I'm going to do the same thing. Now keep in mind, we're doing a 16 hip and a 14 up at the top. So at the top, I'm going to go to my 14, and I'm pinning it the wrong way that I told you not to do. Okay? And then at the bottom, I'm going to my 16. Midway between them, it's still going to be about a 16 in the skirt hip. Okay? And then in between them, just try not to go past your line. In between these two, here. In between these two, here. Once you get good at this, you'll pin them just like I'm pinning them. It won't take much time. And you can pin them upside down like I'm doing. This is a 14. So, and then sometimes if your pins are bent, you don't want to use them. Okay? And here and here. Okay? Now I'm going to go top and bottom, halfway in the middle. And then in between these two is here. In between these two is here. And we're going to do the same thing up top here. In between the middle of these two is there. And then here. All right. And here. Okay. Now, it's okay if these are kind of sliding or kind of turned sideways as long as they're consistent, because everything else is in place and it won't move. All right. Now we're going to pin these facings. These facings are important. So it tells me that one facing goes on the fold, and that is this one right here. Okay. So the size of the skirt is a 14, so I've got plenty of room, because remember my pattern, once I cut it, it's going to give me plenty of space. So let's cut this pattern piece out again. So we're cutting out the facing line on the fold. Okay. You can cut this extra way if you like. I don't do double cutting. I basically cut this away when I cut the pattern. That'll cut it away when I cut the fabric. So your front facing, now notice the top of the facing is going to match the dress skirt like this. So you want it to be consistent. You don't want to turn it upside down. You want to go in the same direction. So that means that it's not going to be on the side that you can see necessarily. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we're going to cut it on the opposite side. Well, I tell you what, since you're new students, I want you to be able to see the lines you're cutting. So I am going to do this one like this. On this particular fabric, it won't matter up or down because the pattern's the same either way. There's no nap in it where it's going to be a right and wrong. So we'll get away with it for this one, okay? So we're going to pin here. We're going to pin it to the edge of the fold like it's supposed to go. And then we're going to go across and pin it at the 14. You're not going past the 14. Okay, and then we're going halfway in between on either side of this. Okay, and then we're going to pin it all the way. All right, now I want to show you how to follow your lines on the pattern because they can get complicated. But once you learn them, you get it, okay, and you'll do well. Okay, so the line that we're going to cut on is the 14 because it's the waist of the dress, of the skirt. So the 14 line, remember, is a line that's 8, 10, 12. The 14 is dash, dot, dash, dot. So on here, the dash dot line is the 14. It's right here. It's this line. So it starts all as one, and then it starts to move out. Dash, dot, dash, dot. That's the line right there. And then it comes around to here, and then it's going to go dash, dot, all the way around here until it refines, okay? That's what's going to happen there. On your skirt top, it's the same thing. It's going to start as a solid line. They all are together. You don't really see the dash dot separate, so you keep going. You keep going, and then you're going to see it peak out. And this pattern's a little hard to read because a 14 technically is going to be 8, 10, 12, 14. So your 14 is going to be in here. So you're going to come up, and you're going to follow it, and follow that line as much as you can. Okay, it's kind of tough, but try to follow it. And it's not going to be so different that it'll make a big difference. But whenever you're going to put a dart in a dress or a skirt, you're going to see a dotted line, and that's what you're going to stitch on. So at the top of dotted lines, it's always going to be a peak. You're going to see a peak. It's going to peak and come back down. Okay, so don't panic. We're going to figure that out as we go along. You'll be able to see how that really shapes up and how it all works together. But you're going to pin your other pattern piece on. And that's this piece here. And this piece is actually going to be cut straight up and down again. And if you see what I'm doing here, I'm going over to the 14. All right, I'm looking for my line 14 right here. Okay, and then that's where I'm going to put this together. Okay. And then we're halfway in between that, halfway in between that, halfway in between here. Okay, and the same thing's going to happen at the top. Okay, and I'm going to try to get to it this way. Okay. Now, another thing you can do, because you don't have a whole lot of pattern pieces, you can cut around it and take them out and turn it and pin so that you can get them on here. Like this facing is a little hard to pin that way. All right, now we're going to talk about cutting. Okay, we're going to start cutting. So when we start cutting here, we're going to cut right on the line. Okay, keep in mind this is the dot slash dot, which you don't see because let me highlight something for you so you can see this. And this is what I call an invisible pin because after a while it disappears. I'm going to highlight this line because this is a stitch line once we cut this out. I want you to see this. This is for size 12 through 14 pattern. Okay? Basically, it looks like that. Okay? I'm going to let you see that because I want you to see how it's outlined. If this were an 8 then the pattern would come over and it would go with the size 8 line. Okay, but what's going to happen now is I'm going to put a pin back in here. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut it to that line. Okay, and then we're going to cut over to the 14. And the 14 is dash dot dash dot. There it is right there. Okay, and that's how we cut over to the 14. Now, in order to do the 16 hip, I have a ruler that you can purchase if you like. It's called a hip curve, okay? Let me get that ruler. Fabrics sells this ruler. It starts at 0 and works their way down. Remember, 0 to 9 is going to be your hip area. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this 0 on the top of this where your 14 line is. And we're going to put the 9 over here where your 16 hip is. And we're just going to draw another line here. Okay? And so this line now is going to go from your 16 hip on the out. Oh, I'm out too far. I do apologize. I'm going to cut that anyway.